Ink's portal delivered me back into the living room, where I had been earlier that day. The vortex met me out above our couch, where I landed on my grand. The cushions bounced me up and down a few times upon impact, until I was nestled safely on top of them, resting on my stomach. Letting out a soft groan, I stretched out my limbs, trying to find a comfortable position before I lifted myself back up. It was deathly silent in the house, which I had expected, given that the rest of its inhabitants were still in the universe where the villains had made their headquarters. My mind lingered on Dream's words. "We have to get out of here. We're not safe here." I couldn't help but feel mildly offended. I knew I wasn't safe there. That was the whole point in going. To help him escape because he was in danger. At the same time, I somewhat knew what he was trying to say. Yes, he wasn't safe there for obvious reasons, but the tone in which he spoke then, it implied that there was something more than neither I or the others could know about. My head turned to look back at the grandfather clock sitting against the wall. It was now early evening, about 6 o'clock. On an average day, this would be the time we would gather together to have dinner. Given the circumstances, it didn't seem as if that was going to happen tonight, and I was hungry. I guessed it wouldn't hurt for me to start preparing my dinner tonight. Besides, I didn't have the faintest clue when the boys would return with Dream. I waited for them to begin eating. I could be hungry for hours. I figured that if I was going to make dinner, didn't hurt to throw on some comfier clothing as well. I made my way down the hall and toward my bedroom, opening my wardrobe and pulling out my favorite nightgown. It was soft and made me feel like a Victorian-era ghost girl. I had embroidered your favorite color, rosebuds into the cotton, giving the garment a breath of life and a touch of personalization. Standing in front of the full-body mirror in my bedroom, I gave a quick twirl, watching the nightgown flutter against the air. I giggled with enjoyment, hugging myself with the poet's sleeves of the gown. Leaving my bedroom, I made my way back down the hall towards the kitchen. I figured I would make myself a light dinner, maybe a small avocado toast, or some fried rice. My mouth watered at the thought of the latter. As I mentally walked myself through the process of having to cook it, I grew weary of the thought of having to cook all of the ingredients on the stovetop, and decided that the toast was likely the better option for the night. I grabbed 2 slices of bread from my bread box, sliding them into the toaster. As the cores grew red and hot from the inside of the toaster, I reached for an avocado, slicing it open down the center. As I began to scoop the inside of the avocado into my bowl, my head shot up with a start. Shivers crawled down my spine, leaving goosebumps in their path. In my peripheral vision, I once again seen that black shadow that I often believed to be watching me. Before I was able to catch the mystery figure, however, it had disappeared back into darkness. I was stuck looking up and around myself for a few long minutes, unnerved by the startling appearance of the shadow. Its presence always left me with a feeling of discomfort. Every time I had begun to let them fade from my memory, they would make a sudden, chilling reappearance. Pop! I jumped to the air, but turning to look behind me, I stuck my fork out like a weapon, preparing to stab at whoever had crept up on behind me. The 2 pieces of toast were all that greeted me. I lowered my orthodox weapon. It had only been the toaster. A bit of sweat rolled down the side of my face, and a shaky, breathless fit to my lips. I hadn't even finished making the avocado in my own bowl, and the toast was already done. I quickly put the ingredients of my meal together and set my toast onto a plate. I took a deep breath in. It's been a long, confusing day, I reminded myself. Perhaps what I needed was a chance to unwind. Reading a good book always calmed my anxieties. It was an escape from the problems of the present, and it would surely keep me occupied until Dream returned to tell me what was going on. I set out down the hall once again, entering the heavy wooden doors that led into the library. Shelves filled with books lined the walls and of the room, making a pathway to the other end of the room. On the opposite wall was a bay window, with golden striping curtains pulled open to show off the view outside. Of course, there wasn't much to look at, save for the sheets of paper that floated aimlessly throughout this duosphere. Silky cushions lined the surface that protruded from the bay window, making a perfect reading spot that I loved so much. I walked over to my favorite section of the library, which I had now memorized by heart. I knew exactly where I was going and the genre of book I was going to find there: fantasy and fairy tales. These books provided the perfect world for escapism. I could travel anywhere I want: Middle-earth, Neverland, Westeros. But what I especially loved were fairy tales. They were simple, yes, and admittedly childish. What drew me to them were the illustrations within their pages. Many of them had been made by ink. As a passion project, he had used to distract himself every so often. Knew exactly which one I wanted to see. I lifted my hands up to a book bound in scarlet leather. The title, little red writing, inscribed down on its spine in golden print. It wasn't a really thick book, but it being such a short story and all, but I loved it all the same. Goodness, and nestled in amongst the pillows which decorated the very window, taking a slice of my toast off of the plate and pressing it against my lips. I took a bite, the flavors melting against my tongue, and let out a sigh of satisfaction. Absolutely perfect. Was exactly what I needed. A moment to relax and unwind, and to let the stress of the world around me dissipate, even if for just a little bit. I opened my book, flipping to the first of its pages. It was just the title page, but Ink had put so much care and detail into the drawings he had done that it was so worth taking in. It was a picture of the grandmother's cottage, surrounded by whimsical, curling plants and leaves. Trees towered over its straw roofs, giving so much depth to the illustration that it felt like as if I had walked into the forest myself. I began to read the story to myself as I munched up on my dinner, my legs crossed to prop up the book. Little Riding Hood was waltzing through the woods, carrying a wicker picnic basket in her hands, which her mother had filled with delicious baked goods like pies and muffins. Little Red's cloak was embellished with beautiful golden details, which brought a beautiful layer of life to illustrations. She wore a pale green dirndl with an ivory linen apron tied around her waist. On the next page, the wolf that lived in the forest had caught up to her, asking her where she was taking her basket. He was massive compared to the little girl, with a thick coat of coal-black fur. His sharp blue eyes were narrowed in a menacing manner as he spoke to the young girl. I loved the way Ink had drawn him. It wasn't often that I had saw the wolf in the story being depicted as such dark fur. Seeing his version, I couldn't help but wonder why. He stood out so starkly against the rest of the illustrations, it made him feel all the more out of place, like there wasn't something right about his being there, which was perfectly in line with the rest of the story. The rest of the story carried on as it typically does. The wolf finds his way to the grandmother's cottage in the middle of the forest, devouring all and dressing in her cloths in order to deceive the little girl. On the next page, we was dressed in her gown, with a frilly bonnet tied around his head. He was tucked under the covers of the grandmother's bed, careful to hide his face from the little girl. The little red had made her way to the cottage, and she was now looking over the sides of the bed at the wolf, who was looking over the edge of the bed to comfort her with those glowing eyes of his young. They were mesmerizing as they stood out against the dark background of the wolf's fur. I found myself at lost in them, as if they were pulling me deeper into the realm of the story. A sudden gust of wind blew throughout the house, slamming the doors of the library shut. I squeaked, slamming the book shut on instinct. I looked up to the ceiling, watching the chandelier sway violently back and forth. The lights flickered, leaving the room dim. I huddled further back into the safety of the bay window, pressing the book close to my chest. I pulled my knees in toward my chest, my back taut against the glass of the window. It was freezing cold, as if I had set myself up against a block of dry ice. Didn't have time to pay attention to the drop in temperature. Something was terribly wrong. Planting my feet on the carpeted ground, I weakly stumbled over to the doors, book still in hand. Perhaps the abrupt changes when we were home, or the result of the boys turning home, and they were looking for me out in the living room. I felt my breathing steady, though I hadn't noticed that it had become ragged in the first place. Surely that was what had caused this. That's what I kept telling myself. Any other explanation meant something had occurred that I hadn't already planned on, and I had to fill myself for supervisors of today. Reaching for the brass handle of the doorknob, I attempted to turn the knob and open the doors to the library. To my horror, they wouldn't budge. I continued tugging at the door handles. This couldn't be happening. Sure, I loved the library, but I didn't love it enough to be trapped inside. I didn't love it anywhere enough to be enclosed in its walls. Even in the large room, I felt myself become claustrophobic. I began to hyperventilate. No, no, no. This couldn't be happening to me. I regularly began to pound at the doors with my fist, dropping the book to the ground. "Hello?" I called out. There was no response. "Is someone there?" I cried again, repeatedly rapping on the wooden door. "Hello? I'm locked inside." Still, my calls for help were fruitless. That's when it truly hit me. My friends hadn't returned home. It didn't add up. The strong winds could only have been the result of a powerful force, such as someone teleporting into the house. Yet, none of the boys were here. And how did I manage to find myself locked in like this? Unfortunately, my answer was quickly revealed to me in the form of an unfamiliar voice. "Oh shit. Oh shit. Do not fret, my dear. You're not alone." No, I don't like that. No, 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 no. Look at Crash. Do not fret, my dear. You're not alone. I felt my heart drop. The voice was low in pitch, ringing out like echoes from depths of a cave. I don't know if it was that low, but Jesus. I turned around to look back at the bay window, where I'd been sitting, but no one came into view. Who? I swallowed nervously. Who's there? The voice responded with a rolling laugh, almost like it was amused by my fright. I felt my agitation. "I mean it!" I called out, doing my best to mask the trembling in my voice. "Show yourself, now!" The source of the voice hissed at me. Such attitude. Aren't you worried I might be dangerous? It would, it would do you best not to upset me, it said. My voice whined at its words, even in the midst of my terror. I hadn't taken into consider I might be in danger. All I had known that I was afraid. Oh, I let my face drop, letting my shoulders hang at my sides, so I couldn't help but hold back into the tension in my back. I'm sorry, I said with hesitance. Will you please reveal yourself? Much better. Yes, I will, but only because you're being such a nice girl. I flinched at its choice of words. I didn't have much time to feel my disgust as I noticed the darkness of a shadow towards the back of the room had begun to expand. The closer the darkness grew to me, the easier it became to make out who I was speaking to. It was a skeleton made up of a liquid pitch-black substance. He was dressed in oddly casual clothing, wearing a pair of basketball shorts and a zip-up hoodie that matched the rest of his body. The only bit of color in him was a single eyelid, which glowed a faint aquamarine-toned blue. I felt my breathing hitch as he drew nearer. He was at least a foot taller than me, making me small and meek in comparison. He must have taken them notice of my shock, because he took off slowly once more. What's wrong? He asked. Do I frighten you? I was quick to shake my head in denial. No. A flawless white smile crept across his face in a horrific manner, gradually stretching like a crack traveling through the ground. Would you like me to? I inhaled sharply. Wasn't sure how I was supposed to respond. Felt as if his words were meant to put me on edge, to get my blood pumping before he went in for the kill. At the same time, something about his question almost felt somewhat suggestive. Was he making advances on me? I shook my head from side to side, wiping the thought through my mind. Whether or not he was flirting with me, I knew I wasn't safe. I couldn't let my guard down. I clicked to the left, turning my back away from the door and toward the wall to get out from the small space he had begun to close me into. Who are you? I asked, holding my hands out in front of me in subconscious defense. He paused, drawing back, but only a little. Of course, where are manners? He started. Before I could process his movements, he had swept one of my hands into his. I froze. His hands were cold and damp, just like I was expecting them to be. My hands sunk into the gelatinous texture of his bones. Drawing my hand into his face, he lowered his face down to meet my knuckles, placing a small prick on them. My face glowed with warmth, my cheeks feeling flushed. I am Nightmare, King of Nightmare. It was like time had stopped. The world had stopped spinning. Everything was absolutely still. I felt dread crawling onto my back, sitting on me like a dead weight as my head grew light. All I could do was repeat his name in my head. Nightmare, nightmare, nightmare. It began to fall out of my mind and onto my tongue. Nightmare, I whispered aloud. His eyes narrowed as he pulled me closer to his chest. That's right, princess. I yanked my hand from his grip, stumbling backward a few steps, my eyebrows knitted together in air. How dare he come into the house, especially when the star Stanzas went home? This had to be considered bad form. What are you doing here? I spat the question like venom, showing that I wasn't going to play into his hands any longer. I could now see that my fear was exactly what he wanted. I was afraid, and my heart was pounding inside my rib cage as if trying to escape. But that didn't mean he had to see it. He snickered at me. "Why so brash? I've only come to take what belongs to me," he said, tilting his head with mock sweetness. "And the moment I've collected it, I will be on my way." I raised my eyebrows at him with suspicion. Nothing that he had come to steal could possibly be for the good of the rest of the team. That was the only reason he could have come here. All night, bottom I thought. The more I began to think, why not do as he please? Perhaps if I let him take what he wants, he'll go away without hurting me. Now my hands twisting my face at him in disgust. If that is so, go ahead and collect what it is you have come to steal, and when you are done, I must ask that you will leave. Immediately, I said. Nightmare erupted into guttural laughter, throwing his shoulders back behind him. I threw a few steps away from him, making sure that there was enough distance between the two of us should he attempt to attack me. Wiping a tear from his eye, he leaned on to me, his face inching closer to mine. His eyes scaled me up and down, taking in my form, despite the protection of my nightgown. The stare violated me deeply that I felt the need to cover my chest with my arm. One of his phalanges brushed a lock of my hair to the side, exposing my ear. He dipped down next to me until the skull was at the side of my ear. "That won't be a problem, dear." I flinched at the feeling of his hand, which he had reached up to caress my cheek. This wasn't right. I won't be alone at all. In an instant, the puzzle pieces snapped into place. I breathed in so fast that the air let out as a shriek as it filled my lungs. I slapped away his hands from my cheek, turning to sprint back toward the doors. My eyes welled up with tears and I ran dismally rushing through my veins. This can't be happening. My hand lunged out in front of me, grasping for the arm of the door. My fingers brushed against it, forcefully pulled back to what felt like a thick, squishy restraint worked on my waist. The black tentacle was firmly wrapped around me, dragging me back to its owner. Turning back to see him, I noticed one of the flailing tendrils behind my captive's back. I squealed with fear, lifting my feet off the ground in an attempt to run out of his grasp, only for my running to be quickly become turned into quaking as I was lifted off the ground. Daniel cackled with devilish delight at my struggling form. His eyelids hung over his pupil, half struck by my horror at the situation. "Don't struggle, princess. You'll only tire yourself out." He was taunting me with a soft, honey tone, twinging me like a mother at a crying child. Dear God. I refused to give it to him. As he held me closer to his body, I desperately bat and paw at his chest. "Let me go, you brute," I insulted, hoping to knock the smirk from his face. He only relished in the nickname. Overjoyed at my writhing and wriggling, I had almost lost hope. It was true. I had begun to grow tired. It was not strong in me. And I realized there wasn't hardly anything I was going to be able to do to get him to release me. The doors to the library flung open. Dream stood in the entrance, his hands balled into tight fists. His bow and arrow were nowhere to be found, likely because they had been taken from him when he was imprisoned in the Cattrall dungeons. "Nightmare," he barked. "Release her at once." Oh, shit. The evil king only laughed at his words, pulling me to his chest until I was nestled up against it. "Sorry, Dream. The world is coming with me." Without warning, Nightmare scooped me into his arms. A portal began to open at the back of the library, making books pages flutter in the wind. Nightmare grabbed my face in one of his hands, forcing my head to turn to Doom. "Go on, princess," he mocked. "Beg your hero to come rescue you." He began to howl with laughter, running toward the portal. I turned around in his arms to look over his shoulder, watching his dream begin to chase after us. "Lion!" he called, reaching a hand out towards me. I grasped onto him, with both my arms bleedingly, the upper half of my body leaning over my kidnapper's torso. "Dream!" Please, help me! I screamed. My feet kicked up and down as I struggled to escape Nightmare's hold of me, but it was no use. He entered the portal with me in his arms, closing it behind us before Dream could follow behind. I had been stolen by King Nightmare. Damn! I'm sorry for the pauses in this. I just woke up and I'm trying to record the rest parts before everyone in my house wakes up, and I don't have time to do it until nighttime. Even then I won't have enough time, so I'm trying to get it done now.